on to the Saptamsa. The Saptamsa, which is the seventh Varga, I think is going to be one of the most interesting Vargas to most of you all. I certainly find it to be one of the most interesting ones. It's very, very unique and different compared to any other Vargas. It's a surprisingly interesting Varga. The deities are different than other types of deities. You'll see, it's really interesting. First, how do we calculate it? Well, the Saptamsa is the seventh Varga. So each sign is divided into 7 smaller portions. With the other Vargas that we've done through so far, 1, 2, or 2, 3, and 4, well, those numbers 2, 3, and 4 are divisible into 12. And so for like the Hora, the first half of Aries was Aries, the second half was Libra. For the Dracana, the first third was Aries, second third Leo, third Sag. For the Saptamsa, it was first quarter Aries, second quarter Cancer, third quarter Libra, fourth quarter Capricorn. So we always skip things. And anytime Parashar has a Varga that we can divide into 12, that's how he does it. The Saptamsa, though, is the first Varga we encounter that we can't divide into 12. Okay? 7 doesn't go into 12. So it's calculated in a different way. The term used to calculate Vargas in this way is Parivriti, which simply means going in the regular order. What's the regular order? Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, and so on. So to calculate this Varga, each sign is divided into 7 parts. Starting at Aries, the first sign, the first Saptamsa is Aries. The second is Taurus. The third is Gemini. The fourth is Cancer. The fifth is Leo. The sixth is Virgo. And the seventh is Libra. Okay? So it goes from Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra. Where does Taurus start? Well, it starts right after Libra. It starts at Scorpio. So the first Saptamsa of Taurus is Scorpio, then Sag, then Capricorn, then Aquarius, then Pisces, and then, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then Aries, and the 7th is Taurus. Where does Gemini start from? Well, the sign following Taurus is Gemini. So Gemini, second Saptamsa is Cancer, third Saptamsa is Leo, etc. And so basically, starting at the first point of Aries, we just go around the zodiac, Aries through Pisces once, Aries through Pisces twice, and we do that 7 times around the zodiac. And that's why, the regular order method or the Parivriti method. And that's how almost any Varga that's not divisible into 12 is calculated. The Navamsha is calculated in the same way. Now let's say I want to figure out the first Saptamsa of Cancer. Well, there's a trick to make it easy. I don't have to start at Aries and go all the way through Aries, all the way through Taurus, all the way through Gemini, until I finally get here to figure out what it is. As it turns out, odd signs always start from the sign themselves and go around. So for instance, Aries starts at Aries and goes 7 signs to Libra. Gemini starts at Gemini and goes 7 signs to Sag. Leo starts at Leo and goes 7 times through Aquarius. Libra starts at Libra and goes around 7 times to Aries. So on odd signs, the first Saptamsa is of the sign itself, and the other Saptamsas just fall around the zodiac. Okay? In even signs, the first Saptamsa is the 7th from that sign, and then it goes around. So the first Saptamsa of Taurus is Scorpio, the second is Sag, then Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, and Taurus. The first Saptamsa of Cancer is Capricorn, then Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and the last Saptamsa of Cancer is Cancer. So for even signs, we just start at the sign 7th from it. And that's the trick, so you don't have to go through the whole zodiac to find out which Saptamsa it is. So it's real easy to calculate portion. Now 7 goes into 30, which is 30 degrees in a sign, a little over 4 times. It's 4 point something, so it's a little over 4, and it doesn't divide equally into degrees and minutes. The Hora was exactly 15 degrees. The Saptamsa was exactly 7.5 degrees. Or 7 degrees and 30 minutes. The Navamsa, every Navamsa is 3 degrees and 20 minutes. The Saptamsa, though, doesn't divide into 4 degrees, 20 minutes, or anything like that. It's 4 degrees, some minutes, some seconds, and some fractions of seconds. So you can't just look exactly where the planet's at really easy and guess its Saptamsa as easily as you can on these other ones. You need to get your calculator out and divide the sign by 7 and get those exact fractionized portions, which is a little over 4 degrees, just so you know, okay? So that's how we calculate the Saptamsa chart, and from that we generate a whole new Varga chart. What's the chart for? Well, Parashara says children, grandchildren, etc. should be known from Saptamsa. And that really, it surprises us when you first think about it, because the 5th bhava is children, right? So how come we look at the Saptamsa, which is the 7th Varga, for children? Okay? And that's where a lot of the mysteries of the Saptamsa start. All of a sudden we've skipped 2 Vargas, number 5 and number 6. We went right from 4 to 7. We skipped 5 and 6. And we've gone on to 7, and we're using that for one of the Vargas we skipped. Okay? Well, there's a reason to it. Because the Saptamsa is not your physical little child that you make. Okay? The physical child you make is a person in your life. And that person is ruled by the 5th house. And to find out things about your child, you have to read that 5th house cusp in all the Vargas. You got to read it in the Rashi chart to find out about their body. You got to read that 5th cusp in the Trimsamsa chart to find out about their possible health and diseases. You have to read about the 5th cusp in the Navamsa to find out about your children's marriage potential, and so on. So that's the 5th cusp. If your child are going to be healthy or not, look at the 5th cusp in the Rashi and the 5th cusp in the Trimsamsa, the same way that you would look at the Lagna cusp in the Rashi and the Lagna cusp in the Trimsamsa to find out about your own health problem. Okay? So the Saptamsa is not just about creating, it's not our children. What it's about is about creating our children. Okay? And that's a 7th house thing, right? 7th house is the house of intercourse and sexual intercourse and having a partner to do that with. So what the 7th house really is, it's the product that we're able to create with another person. Okay? It's the Varga where we create with something outside ourselves in order to create something new. Okay? One possible thing that's created is a child. And in most people's lives, the most important thing they create is their children in an average person's life. But the 7th Varga is even more than that. Because what are children, really, on a level beyond just cute little bumpkins, you know? They're the things that we create that we leave behind us when we leave Earth, when we die. And they're a dynasty, right? And the 7th house represents death. The 7th house is the most, the strongest death-inflicting house. Okay? And it represents death. It's kind of like the sunset. We're born, we rise, and we go towards the sunset to die. And what we leave after we die is the 7th house. It's our dynasty. And as we're on the path of life, which is that first 7th house axis that goes with the chart, we're going to create things with other people, and we're going to create our dynasty too. And like I said, most people's dynasty is the children they create. And for that, it requires that they have a partner. And that's the 7th house of the Saptamsa. So the Saptamsa is a critical bhava for in respect to partners. Meeting a partner that you can actually co-create something with, whether a child or something else, requires a good Saptamsa chart. Okay? Some people might have the fate to get married because of their Navamsa, but they may not have children. They may never create anything with their spouse because the Saptamsa is flawed. Or they may have lots of children with lots of different people even because their Saptamsa is creating a lot, but their Navamsa is really bad, so no relationships last, and they're not able to ever get married. Okay? So that's, children are a very separate thing from marriage, but children are something that two people produce together. Okay, so the dynasty that we leave behind is always something that it's not something we just do ourselves. Okay, it's something we do that we either do with another person, such as having a child, or in the case of some people who have a big kind of dynasty to create and leave behind. Their dynasty is dependent upon their relationship to the public, and the seventh house is also the house of public. Say you take someone like the Beatles, for instance, whose dynasty is their music. So we have all this music, which is still some of the most popular music on the face of the earth. And, there's this whole dynasty of music that they love. That's their dynasty. For their dynasty to be successful or to be large as it is, they have to have a good Saptamsa. And they have to have a good seventh house of the Saptamsa. Because that's what they're leaving behind is their music. For some people like Woolworth, for example, he left behind a corporation named after himself. That was his dynasty. A corporation that went on to feed thousands of people in many, many years. Hundreds of thousands of people probably got fed off that, from working at that business. Microsoft. So Bill Gates' dynasty, when he passes, will be having created Microsoft. You take a guru, for instance, like Paramahansa Yogananda. His dynasty is his work, okay, which lives after him. Okay, Jesus' dynasty was Christianity. Okay, we could certainly make some jokes about there being some afflictions of his Saptamsa, considering what the public has done with it. But anyway, so the dynasty is what is the biggest thing we leave behind. And that's either something we create with another person, such as children, or it's something we create that the public embraces so it remains after we die. Enough people think it's worth keeping alive even after we're dead and no longer have an interest in it. So that's what our dynasty is. So you can see that Saptamsa is way more bigger than just a children. It's what you leave behind. It's your children, your grandchildren. It's something that you give life to, that you create, but which after you dies has life after it, continues after it. That things still happen to it after it, that it's still enjoyed after it. So think of like the Beatles. They all, so sure, some are still living, but they're not playing together as a band anymore. But they created this dynasty of music, which affected, culture for a very, very long time, which created a life of its own. The music of the Beatles inspired other musicians, and that's the children of the Beatles' music, and the Beatles' music is the child of the Beatles. So anytime we create something that takes on a life of its own, which means it is in itself somehow creates and changes things and makes things happen, that's what our dynasty is. That's the children and the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren. And people with a powerful Saptamsa, they create these dynasties either as, children, or, good children, or lots of children who go on to found many, many other children, or through, if they have, really powerful yogas in their chart, and they have, this fate to have a different type of dynasty, then the Saptamsa represents that dynasty. So, it's really better to say the Saptamsa is your dynasty, and dynasty requires a partner to create a child with, or a public, or at least a portion of the public, which is the seventh house, that embraces what you've created and left behind. And in embracing that, it gives it a life of its own. Okay? So when we take our creative juices, whether physical, through semen, or mental, through inspiration, and we create something with those, if we just create it for ourselves, like you could be the best musician in the world and be strumming away on your piano or something, your guitar, or playing your piano, if nobody hears it, it's not a dynasty. It needs to be embraced by somebody else. And at the risk of being crude, being the best pianist, playing the most beautiful music that no one hears, that doesn't inspire anyone, that's not embraced by anyone, is the same as masturbating when it comes to creating a dynasty. You use that creative juice, you throw the creative juice out there in a room all by yourself, and it's not embraced. It's not embraced by a woman who can then grow a child because of your help. and it's not embraced by the public, who once embracing it gives it a life. So the dynasty, the point I'm making, requires embrace, okay, which is the 7th house. It requires the embrace of a sexual partner, or it requires the embrace of the public. Or if a partnership is co-creating something else together, they still have to come together and embrace each other, symbolically speaking, to make that thing come alive. Okay? So, it's the dynasty that we create with the help of the embrace of another, whether that another is a member of the opposite sex, or whether that another is a partner that we're creating something else with, or whether it's the public. And the key thing is, the dynasty is not possible without, the dynasty is not possible without another person. It's something you wouldn't be doing, or you couldn't do without another person. Okay? The music of the Beatles would have never influenced music for 50 years after them if the public had not heard it, right? Obviously. You can't have a baby by yourself. Okay? So, the Saptamsa represents things that you're able to do because of the embrace of somebody else or the public. Okay? And that's an important thing. Some relationships are really productive. They're always building something together, whether it's children or working on this project or something. And that is indicated by a strong Saptamsa. And these people get into partnerships where they do things that they wouldn't have done had they not been in that partnership. Okay? Other people get married, and they got bad Saptamsas. So even though they're married, they don't do anything that they wouldn't be doing if they were not married. You know, they still go to the beach just like they did. They still live in the same town like they did. They still don't have children, just like when they were single. You know what I mean? They're really not doing anything uniquely different than if they were single. It's just, they're doing it with a person. That's a bad Saptamsa. Okay? A good Saptamsa that really enriches marriage life is when the two people are doing things because of the fact that they're with that person. Their life is actually taken them to places they wouldn't have gone before without that person. Such as, well, with you, I wouldn't be having children if I didn't have you, obviously. But also it could be in the context of other things. Okay? So, a good Saptamsa gives a lot of productive reasons, a lot of things that the people are going to produce and do with each other, things that they wouldn't be doing or experiencing were they alone. A bad Saptamsa basically indicates partnerships that are not really creating anything, really not doing anything different. Okay? So a good Saptamsa really enriches a partnership of any type. Okay? So, what we leave behind after we die, and which has a life of its own after we die, that's the dynasty, and that's the Saptamsa. That's what we're looking at when we look at the Saptamsa. So you can see this is a very serious Varga. You know, this is like, wow. There's an old astrologer who wrote a book called Constellational Astrology back, I think, in the 1920s. And his name was Deluge. And he was probably the first person that wrote a book on sidereal Vedic astrology in the West. And in that book, he said the Saptamsa is important for looking at character, additionally. So he kind of gave it more meaning than just children. Okay? Alright, so anyway, so that's how we calculate the Saptamsa. Then the other interesting thing about the Saptamsa is, one thing I want to clarify. So the Saptamsa is more the creation of your children. Okay? And your children's creation of more children than it is the actual physical embodied child that you have. To see the physical embodied child that you have, you look at the fifth cusp in the Rashi, the fifth cusp in the Trimsamsa, the fifth cusp in the Shashtiamsa, and all the other Vargas. But the act of creating with another person, creating a child, is going to be the Saptamsa. Okay? Now, since the Saptamsa is the fifth Varga. There's Varga number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. So Rashi, Hor, Draka, and Saptamsa. Then number 7. 5 and 6 are skipped. For some reason, Parashar decides to skip number 5 and 6. And then at number 7, he takes us to them. So, one important thing, this is the 7th numbered Varga, but it's the 5th Varga in the Shodasha Vargas, which are the 16 Vargas of Parashar. And so, like this is Sun, for this is the key planet for Varga number 1, Moon for the 2nd Varga, Mars for the 3rd Varga, Mercury for the 4th, and Jupiter for the 7th Varga. And we all know Jupiter represents children, right? Jupiter, in fact, is the creation of the children. Okay, Jupiter produces children. He's the creative energy. Jupiter represents the sexual chakra, where all that creative energy is housed. Our creative intelligence is Jupiter. Of all the planets, Jupiter is the creative one. People with strong Jupiters are very creative individuals. Okay? A lot of people don't look at Jupiter as being that creative. We usually will think Mercury or something. No, Mercury is skilled and talented. Mercury can do things. But the people creating the things is Jupiter. Okay? Jupiter is the hyper-creative person, People with strong Jupiters and prominent Jupiters they're really creative people. Jaimini says Jupiter moon or Mercury moon or Venus moon can make an author. But of all those, Jupiter moon makes the best time to author. Because again, Jupiter has a greater level of creativity. So Jupiter is this planet that generates things through our creativity. Whether our sexual creativity or intellectual or creative intelligence. Okay? So a strong Jupiter is an important thing to have in the Saptamsa in order to have that creative potential. Okay, whether to create a dynasty of a child or a dynasty of something that the public embraces and which therefore lives after you die. So there's a reason that Parashar ignores these two Vargas. Not that they couldn't be used, but he singles out what's most critical and most important. And Saptamsa is a critical Varga. A lot of times it's hard, for people to think of Jupiter as this really sexual and creative planet, because we're always taught Jupiter is so spiritual and da-di-da-di-da. And Venus is the sex miscreant. Well, the opposite is actually more true. The old books say that if Jupiter is causing Hamsa Yoga, meaning if Jupiter is on an angle in owner exaltation and therefore a very prominent, strong Jupiter, the person's sexual desires will never be fulfilled. They always got extra sexual energy. They're never sexually satisfied. Because Jupiter is all that creative energy. They got so much of those creative juices that they're just not satisfied sexually. Okay? And then the same works go on to say Venus in owner exaltation, causing Malavya Yoga on an angle, is a person who has imperturbed senses. Somebody who has enough self-fulfillment and enough balance fulfillment that their senses aren't ruffled. They're nice and peaceful. So there's a lot of indications when we really start looking at it that Jupiter can be extremely sexual. Okay, and Jupiter has to do with sexual energy, which makes sense if you think of what chakra Jupiter rules. It rules the navel or the sexual chakra, where all that creative energy is housed. And ideally, we want to bring Jupiter up and exalt it in the third eye in Cancer, where that creative energy has a vast wisdom behind it. And the worst thing, of course, is to drop it into the root chakra in Capricorn, where it gets debilitated, where a person physically lives for the creative pleasure more, rather than a greater purpose beyond just the physical realm. So, Jupiter is, not always the divine planet. He's the creative energy. Where he's being focused is what's important. And since he represents the creative energy, which is really what the Saptamsa is about, it's about creating. And then, something that lives beyond us. And that's what real creation is. Just making something that disappears is not a great creation. A great creation is something that actually works, that actually lives, that actually survives, and which itself creates things. And that's what a dynasty is all about. Okay? Alright, the other thing we have is the Saptamsa lords. Now Parashara says the Saptamsa lords are these really weird words. Shara, Shira, Dadya, Ajya, Ikshirasha, Madhu, and Shuddha Jala are produced in an odd. So that's the order in odd sign. And then he says in an even, Shuddha Jala, etc. So in an even sign, these deities are reversed. Shuddha Jala is the first Saptamsa, then Madhu, Ikshirashu, Ajya, Dadya, Shira, and Shara. So these are some weird deities. In fact, these aren't deities. These are substances, liquids, that can be consumed as food. But these are all liquids that are considered to be endowed with the great essence of vitality. These are the sort of liquids, the fluids that are considered to really be packed with virya, with vitality. Okay? And vitality is what creates, right? It's that life force, that living force, that actually has an intelligence of its own that's able to create. That energy is considered to be more abundant in certain foods. And if you study Ayurveda, you might know what these are. But these are all foods, basically, that are considered to have an excess or a high abundance of that virya, that life-endowing quality within them. And therefore, these are considered good things to eat when you need to regenerate and rejuvenate your body. Okay? So these deities are not like gods that live in the sky. They're essences of the gods, we can say. They're vital essences within food that we can consume and therefore use to create. And they're very highly symbolic. Okay? Very highly symbolic. Okay? Now we're going to talk about those deities, quote unquote, those virya endowed substances in a minute. However, first I want to talk about some other ideas along the Saptamsas. In Brihat Parashara, so when we do Parashara style astrology, we use Varga charts. We calculate a Saptamsa chart that looks like a Rashi chart that's created from the Rashi chart. But in a lot of other systems of astrology, they don't look at a Saptamsa chart. They just want to know the Saptamsa lords. Just like in the Hora, they want to know the Hora of the sun or moon. Or in the Drekana, they want to know the planet that rules the Drekana. And in those systems, they don't actually calculate a chart. They just want to see a sub-ruler of a particular part of a sign. Most of the information we have on the Saptamsa, allow me to tell you the truth, all the information we have on the Saptamsa, which is only found in Yavana Jataka, which has a full chapter devoted to it, and there's nothing else on the Saptamsa anywhere, okay? It's a naked Varga with not a lot of coverage. But in the Yavana Jataka, they don't create a Saptamsa based on signs and a chart that's based on signs. Yavana Jataka just finds the lords of the Saptamsas, the planetary lords. And what he says is, there are portions of each sign, they say, belonging to the 7 planets. And these Saptamsas undergo modifications according to the planet. So they're saying every sign has 7 parts. And the part of the sign is going to be modified in accordance with the planet that rules that part. So if there's a part ruled by the sun, that part of the sign has a sun quality to it. So that's the sun Aries quality. Another part of Aries will be ruled by Venus. And that's the Venus Aries quality, and so on. And that makes sense, doesn't it? Because we know there's 7 planets. So that makes us think, wow, this Varga should be really important, relevant to the planet somehow. Maybe every part is ruled by the planet. That's a logical jump, isn't it? And Yavana Jataka says, indeed, that's the way it is. Then he says, they say that the Saptamsas belong to the lords of the signs in order, beginning with the lord of the sign itself and excluding repetition. This is an important thing, and excluding repetitions. So in Aries, the first Saptamsa is Aries. The second Saptamsa is Taurus. I said that all wrong. Let me go back. He takes the lords of the sign. So the first Saptamsa of Aries is going to be ruled by Mars, the lord of Aries. The second Saptamsa of Aries is going to be ruled by Venus, the ruler of Taurus. The third Saptamsa of Aries is going to be ruled by Mercury, the lord of Gemini. The fourth Saptamsa of Aries is going to be ruled by the moon, the lord of Cancer. The fifth portion by the sun, the lord of Leo. The sixth portion will not be ruled by Virgo because we already have Mercury. The sixth will not be ruled by Venus because we already have Venus. It will not be ruled by Mars because we already have Mars. It'll be ruled by Jupiter because we don't have Jupiter yet. Then the seventh portion will be ruled by Saturn, the lord of the next sign. So he excludes the signs that have already been covered by a planet. So according to this system, the first part of Aries is ruled by Mars, the second part by Venus, the third by Mercury, the fourth by Moon, fifth by Sun, sixth by Jupiter, and seventh by Saturn. In a way, it seems logical, very logical actually, to rule each part of a sign by a planet, because there's 7 embodied planets, right? There's 7 creative karaka-producing planets. All the planets are karakas, producers, and they're going to produce things in a certain way. But how logical is it to work out the planetary lords in this strange way? Okay? Where you skip signs. Why not skip the first sign first? It's just kind of weird. It doesn't seem really clean. And the reason I say that is because I started thinking about how clean of a system it was, because I didn't find the information gained from this made that much sense. Okay, that worked that well. Okay? So saying that the fifth, Saptamsa of Aries was ruled by Leo, or ruled by the sun, I just haven't found that to work really well in practice and so on. Okay? But that's how Yavana Jataka went about it. And later on in this handout I give you, you're going to see results of planets in the Saptamsa of the 7 planets. And you're going to see the results of the Lagna in different Saptamsas, and it's all based on this arrangement. Okay? As another example, say we take Cancer. The first Saptamsa of Cancer is ruled by the moon, the second by the sun, the third by Mercury, the fourth by Venus, the fifth by Mars, the sixth by Jupiter, the seventh by Saturn. It happens to work out really nice counting from Cancer because there's no duplicated signs, right? Because this is the border where, Mercury, Venus, Venus. So since we're just on one side of the Cancer-Capricorn line, we don't skip any signs, and it looks really nice and clean. But from any other sign that we start, except for Capricorn, of course, starting at Aquarius to Leo, we'll also have this nice thing with no skips. We're always going to have skipping signs, and it just seems kind of odd. And in my opinion, that's not really the correct way of doing it. My opinion is we need to calculate a Saptamsa chart and use the Saptamsa chart. And if we want to find planetary lords of the Saptamsas, we'll actually do something a little different, although in most cases we're just going to use the planetary lord found in the Saptamsa chart itself, which will be different, where the first Saptamsa of Aries is Aries, the second Saptamsa is Taurus, ruled by Venus, the third is Mercury, ruling, Gemini, the fourth is Cancer, ruled by the moon, the fifth is the sun, ruling Leo, the sixth is Mercury, ruling Virgo, and Venus, ruling the seventh. So in that case, from Aries, you have 2 Saptamsas falling in the signs of Venus in the chart, and 2 in the signs of Mercury. And so Mercury is going to rule, more planets in Aries Saptamsa, and Saturn will never rule any planets based on the Saptamsa chart. And in making predictions with dashas, we need to refer to the Saptamsa chart, of course. Okay? But like I said, that your arrangement given Yavana Jataka I haven't found working all that well. And if you look at the deities, which we're going to cover in detail next, it really makes you wonder how they came up with that arrangement. I just think they just kind of guesstimated. I don't think it comes from any authoritative source. I think someone just was trying to make 7 planets work with Saptamsas and came up with that.